Welcome to Dusky Lore. Close your eyes, dim the lights, and listen closely as the shadows begin to speak. Story 1. There was something about being alone in a house that made you notice even the faintest sound. When you are surrounded by people, those creaks and groans of an old house blend into the background, barely registering in your mind. But when you are completely alone, those sounds become sharper, more insistent, as if the house itself is trying to get your attention. That was exactly what I was thinking about the night it happened. I was 16 years old, and my parents had gone out that afternoon, leaving me alone in our house at the edge of the woods. It was not the first time I had stayed there by myself, but that night something felt different, something I could not quite identify. The house was silent, the kind of silence that makes you feel as if you are the only person left in the world. I had my homework spread out on the kitchen table, but I was not really paying much attention to it. The television was on in the living room, casting a dim glow across the space, and from there I could hear the muffled sounds of a sitcom playing in the background. Outside, the sun had gone down a while ago, and everything beyond the windows was swallowed by darkness. Our house backed directly onto a thick forest, the trees crowded close together like silent sentries. During the day it was beautiful, a place where I could lose myself in nature, surrounded by the scent of pine and the whisper of leaves. But at night those same trees took on a different character. They became a wall of blackness, a place where anything could be hiding just out of sight. I was not scared, not really. I was used to the forest, to the way it seemed to close in around the house after dark. But as I sat there tapping my pen absently against my notebook, I could not shake the feeling that something was off. It all started with a sound, a faint, distant noise that I barely noticed at first. I stopped, my pen hovering over the paper, and listened. Nothing. Just the usual creaking of the house, the low hum of the refrigerator, the canned laughter from the television show in the next room. I brushed it off and went back to my homework, but a few minutes later I heard it again. This time it was louder, clearer. A voice. Faint, yes, but unmistakable, and it was coming from the woods. I dropped the pen. My heart lurched as I strained to listen. The voice was far away, almost like a whisper carried by the wind, but there was urgency in it, a desperation that seemed to reach toward me, begging to be heard. Help! Please! Help! I frowned, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. It did not sound unnatural, just like someone in trouble, but the woods were dense, full of brush and uneven ground. It was not the kind of place someone wandered into by accident, especially not at night. I stood and moved to the window that faced the backyard. The moon was high, spilling pale light over the trees, but I could not see anything unusual. Just the same dark shapes of the forest, the same stillness that had always been there. But the voice did not stop. Help. It was a woman's voice, soft, pleading, growing a little stronger each time it repeated. My first instinct was to run outside and see if someone needed help, but something stopped me. There was something strange about that voice, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was too faint, too far away, as if it were not really coming from the woods at all, but from somewhere else entirely. Help! I swallowed, and suddenly my mouth was dry. I could not just ignore it. What if someone really was in danger? But the longer I listened, the stronger that gnawing unease became, that insistent feeling that something was not right. In the end, I made a decision. I opened the kitchen drawer and took out a flashlight. My hand was shaking a little as I turned it on. The beam cut through the darkness, lighting up the yard as I stepped outside. The night was cold, and the air smelled of pine and damp earth. The trees towered over me, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. But the voice was gone. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest, waiting to hear it again. But the woods were silent. The only sound was the rustle of leaves shifting in the wind. I should have gone back inside. I should have locked the door and forgotten about it. But something pushed me forward, made me take a few hesitant steps toward the edge of the woods. Help. The voice came again. Now it was louder, closer, as if it were coming from just beyond the tree line. A chill ran down my spine, but I kept moving, the flashlight casting long shadows across the ground. "Who's there?" I called, and my voice trembled slightly. For a moment there was no answer. Then the voice came again, clear and sharp. "Help me, please." Now it was so close, so real, that I almost believed it. Almost. But there was something wrong in the way it echoed through the trees. Something unnatural in the way it seemed to bounce off the trunks and come from every direction at once. I stopped. The beam of my flashlight shook as I pointed it toward the woods. Every instinct in me screamed at me to turn around, to go back to the house and lock the door. But I could not shake the feeling that something was watching me. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the voice stopped. I stood frozen in place, the trembling light of the flashlight sweeping over the trees. The silence was deafening. It pressed in on me from all sides, and I could not get rid of the certainty that something was terribly wrong. I was about to step back, to retreat to the safety of the house, when I heard a new sound, a crackling in the bushes just ahead. I swung the flashlight toward the noise. The beam carved a strip of light through the darkness. For a moment I saw nothing, only the same shadowy trees, the same tangle of undergrowth. But then I caught movement, a figure. It was standing just beyond the reach of the light, barely visible among the shadows. My heart slammed against my chest and I stepped back. My breath caught in my throat. The figure did not move. It did not make a sound. It just stood there watching me. A wave of fear went through me, so intense I nearly dropped the flashlight. My mind filled with questions. Who was it? What did it want? Why was it standing there still, hidden in the darkness? And then I realized something that made my blood run cold. The figure was standing exactly where the voice had been coming from, but it had not moved. It had been there the whole time. That meant the voice had not been moving through the trees. It had come from that exact spot, as if the figure had been calling to me. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure was little more than a silhouette, but there was something wrong with its posture, with the way its body seemed to blend into the shadows, as if it were not fully there. I knew I had to get out of there. I knew I had to turn around and run back to the house, but my legs felt like lead. My feet seemed rooted to the ground as I kept staring at the figure, unable to look away. And then slowly the figure began to move. It stepped just far enough into the light. My breath caught when I saw it clearly for the first time. It was a woman, or at least it had once been. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were dark, hollow pits. Her hair hung in tangled strands around her face, and her torn clothes clung to her thin body like rags. But what terrified me most was her expression. She was smiling. A wide, unnatural smile stretched across her face from one side to the other, exposing teeth that were too sharp, too white. It was the kind of smile that should not exist on a human face, the kind of smile that hits you with a jolt of pure terror. And then, in a voice that sounded both familiar and completely alien at the same time, she spoke. "Help me." I did not think. I did not hesitate. I just turned and ran. The flashlight bounced wildly in my hand as I sprinted toward the house. My heart hammered in my chest and the air came in ragged gasps. I could hear movement behind me, the sound of something pushing through the bushes. but I did not dare look back. I reached the back door and fumbled for the handle. I yanked it open and practically threw myself inside. I slammed it shut, locked it with shaking hands, and stumbled backward without taking my eyes off the darkness on the other side. I stood there for a moment, my chest heaving as I tried to catch my breath. The house was silent. The only sound was the frantic pounding of my heart in my ears. Then I heard it again. The voice, right outside the door. "Help me, please." I backed away even farther, my mind in chaos. That was impossible. I had just seen her in the woods. I had just heard her calling to me from among the trees. How could she be there so close, so fast? I grabbed the phone from the counter, my fingers trembling as I dialed 911. The operator's voice felt like a lifeline thrown in from the real world, something I clung to desperately. "There's someone outside my house," I stammered, my voice barely steady. "I don't know who it is, but they're trying to get in. Please send someone." The operator assured me that help was already on the way, but the wait felt endless. Every second stretched out like hours. I could still hear the voice calling from just outside the door, but I refused to go near it. I refused to look out the window. "Help me." The words repeated again and again, like a broken record, and each repetition sent a fresh wave of terror through my body. Finally, after what felt like forever, I heard sirens in the distance. The voice stopped at once. I felt a brief rush of relief. But when I looked out the window, the backyard was empty. The police arrived a few minutes later. Their flashlights cut through the darkness as they searched the area. I told them everything. The voice, the figure in the woods, the way it had appeared so suddenly, so impossibly close to the house. They searched the woods. They combed through every part of the area. But they found nothing. No footprints. No sign that anyone had been there. It was as if it had never existed. The officers stayed a while longer, trying to calm me down, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. They did not believe me. Not really. They thought I had imagined it, that my mind had played a trick on me. But I knew what I had seen. I knew what I had heard. After they left, I locked every door and window in the house. My hands were still shaking. The fear had not gone away. It was still there, gnawing at the edges of my mind, making me jump at every little sound. I kept expecting to hear the voice again, to hear it calling to me from the darkness. But the night stayed silent. In the days that followed, I tried to put what had happened behind me. I told myself it had just been a nightmare, a trick of the light, anything that would make it seem less real. But deep down, I knew the truth. I knew that something had been in those woods that night, something that should not have been there, and I knew it had been calling to me. I moved away from that house. I left those woods behind. But the fear never really left. Now it is a part of me, because I know that whatever was out there in those trees is still waiting for someone else to hear its call. Story 2. It was one of those nights that makes you want to curl up with a good book and a cup of tea. The kind of night when the rain taps steadily against the windows, thunder rumbles in the distance with a low growl, and the outside world feels far away. I had always liked stormy weather, the way it made everything feel cozier, more intimate. But that night there was something different in the atmosphere, something unusual in the air. I was home alone. My parents had gone out that evening to celebrate their anniversary. It was just me in the old house, that ancient house that had belonged to my family for generations. I had grown up there, so the sounds of the house were familiar to me, even comforting. But as the rain intensified and the wind picked up, the usual creaks and groans seemed louder, more insistent. I had spent the first part of the evening in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, watching television. But when the storm got worse, I decided to go upstairs to my room. The house was silent, deeply silent. I climbed the stairs slowly, running my hand along the wooden banister. The hallway was dark, and the shadows cast by the flickering bulbs danced across the walls. I paused for a moment when I reached the top, listening to the wind howl outside before turning and heading toward my room. But just as I was about to grab the doorknob, I heard it. A faint sound barely audible over the storm. A dull, muffled thud, as if something heavy had fallen onto the floor. I froze, my hand hovering over the doorknob and my heart lurching. The noise was coming from the basement. For a moment I told myself I had imagined it, that the wind was playing tricks on me, rattling the windows and making the old house groan. But then it came again. Another dull thud followed by a low dragging sound, as if something were being pulled across the floor. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I did not want to go down there. I did not want to face whatever was making those sounds. But I also knew I could not just ignore them. I had to check, if only to convince myself it was nothing. I stepped away from my bedroom door and started down the stairs slowly. The old wood creaked beneath my weight. The noise continued, growing clearer as I approached the basement door. It was rhythmic, almost deliberate, and it set my nerves on edge. I reached the door. My hand trembled slightly as I wrapped my fingers around the cold brass knob. The basement had always been cold, even in summer, and the air seeping through the crack beneath the door sent a chill down my spine. I took a deep breath, turned the knob, and opened it. The basement stairs were steep and narrow, the kind that makes you feel as though you are descending into another world. The light switch was at the top beside the entrance, and I hesitated for a moment before turning it on. The single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling buzzed to life, spreading weak yellow light over the steps. I stood there for a moment, staring down into the darkness below, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound had stopped the moment I opened the door, leaving only the low hum of the bulb and the distant rumble of thunder outside. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a box had fallen over. Maybe the wind had somehow gotten into the basement and knocked something down. But the discomfort twisting in my gut would not go away. I started down slowly. The old wood protested with every step. The basement smelled of dampness, mold, and dust hanging in the air. It was a large space with stone walls and a low ceiling that made it feel even more oppressive. The floor was crowded with old furniture, storage boxes, and other forgotten remnants of the past, all covered in a thin layer of dust. When I reached the bottom step, I swept the room with my flashlight beam, straining to see better in the dim light. Everything seemed to be in its place. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing that could have caused those noises. But just as I was about to turn around, I saw something that made my blood run cold. In the far corner of the basement, partially hidden behind an old wardrobe, there was a pile of blankets. At first, I did not think much of it. I assumed they were old sheets or blankets that had been left there and forgotten. But as I stared at them, I realized something was wrong. The blankets were moving. It was a slight movement, almost imperceptible, but they were definitely moving, shifting as if something underneath them was trying to get out. My breath caught in my throat and my mind filled with possibilities. A rat, a raccoon that had somehow gotten inside. But as I stood there stiff as a statue, the blankets shook more violently. Then I heard breathing, soft, raspy. That was not an animal. A cold wave of fear ran through my body. My heart hammered in my chest as I kept staring at the moving blankets. This was not a small animal. It was something much larger, something that had no business being in my basement. My mind spun trying to decide what to do. Call the police, call my parents. But what was I supposed to tell them? That there was something under a pile of blankets in the basement? No. First, I had to know what it was. I had to see it with my own eyes. I took one hesitant step forward. The beam of my flashlight trembled as I moved closer to the pile of blankets. The breathing grew louder, more labored, as if whatever was underneath was struggling to draw air. My hand was shaking when I stretched out my fingers and touched the edge of the blanket. It was damp, cold to the touch. I had to fight the urge to pull my hand away immediately. I took a deep breath, grabbed the blanket, and yanked it back. What I saw underneath froze my blood. There was a man lying on the floor, curled up in the fetal position. His face was hidden behind tangled hair. His clothes were dirty, torn, and stained with something dark. His skin was pale, almost grayish, as if he had not seen sunlight in weeks. But what terrified me most were his eyes. They were wide open, bloodshot, and staring straight ahead without blinking. There was something wild in them, a naked, total madness that turned my stomach with fear. His chest rose and fell in short, broken breaths, and then his eyes locked onto mine with such brutal intensity that I felt the urge to scream. Then, without any warning, he lunged at me. I stumbled backward, barely managing to dodge his outstretched hands as they clawed at the air. His mouth twisted into a feral grimace. He was fast, faster than I would have imagined, and I barely had time to react before I saw him lurching toward me, with that deranged look still burning in his eyes. I turned and ran. My heart pounded as I raced up the stairs. I could hear him behind me, his heavy, uneven footsteps, as if he were struggling to keep up. But I did not dare look back. I reached the top, slammed the basement door shut, and locked it with trembling hands. The air came in broken gasps as I desperately tried to think of what to do. I had to get out of the house. I had to call the police. But just as I turned to reach for the phone, I heard a crash from the other side of the door. He was trying to break through it. The pounding grew louder, more frantic, as the man hurled himself against the door again and again. The wood groaned under the force, and I knew it would not hold much longer. I had to act fast. I grabbed the phone, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. "There's a man in my basement," I said in a trembling voice, stumbling over the words. "He's trying to get through the door. Please send someone quickly." The operator assured me that help was already on the way, but the wait felt endless. The pounding against the door grew more violent with every passing second. I backed away, unable to take my eyes off the wood as it began to splinter under the man's attack. My mind filled with the worst possible scenarios. What if the door gave way? What if he got out before the police arrived? And just when I was about to lose all hope, the pounding suddenly stopped. For a moment there was silence. A heavy, oppressive silence, the kind that makes your skin crawl. I did not dare move. I did not even dare breathe. I stood there listening, trying to catch any sign of movement on the other side of the door. But there was nothing. Slowly I moved closer, my heart feeling as if it were about to burst out of my chest, and pressed my ear against the wood. I heard nothing. No footsteps, no breathing. Nothing. Had he given up? Had he gone back into the basement? I wanted to believe it, but the fear twisting in my stomach told me otherwise. Something was wrong. And then, without warning, the door burst open. The man threw himself at me, his eyes blazing with rage. I screamed and stumbled backward as he grabbed me. His fingers dug into my arms with a strength that did not match how gaunt he looked. We struggled. His breath was hot against my face. His grip was iron. I tried to pry him off me. I tried to push him away. But he was relentless. He would not stop. His eyes stayed fixed on mine, overflowing with a madness that terrified me to my core. I could feel my strength leaving me. My vision began to blur as he pinned me to the floor. Then his hands closed around my throat. He was strangling me, and I knew I did not have much time left. But just as my vision began to darken, I heard it. Sirens. Getting louder. The man hesitated. His grip loosened just enough for me to break free. I staggered to my feet, gasping for air as I stumbled away from him. And at that moment, the front door burst open. It was the police. They pulled him off me and dragged him away. I collapsed onto the floor, trembling with relief as I watched them take him out of the house. His crazed eyes were still locked on me, and that twisted smile was still stretched across his lips. The police stayed with me for hours, asking questions, trying to piece together what had happened. I told them everything. The noises in the basement, the man under the blankets, the way he had attacked me. They searched the basement, checking every corner of the place, but they found nothing out of the ordinary. No sign of how the man had gotten in. No evidence that he had been living there. They took him to a psychiatric institution, but I never found out who he was or where he had come from. The police told me he was a drifter, someone who had spent years living on the margins, moving from place to place. But that did not explain why he had chosen my basement, or why he had been hiding there. And I can only write this story after many years of therapy. If the police had not arrived in time, I would not be here anymore. Story 3. I was 10 years old when it happened, and it is a night I will never forget. My parents rushed out to the hospital close to midnight. My mom was in labor, and it was time for my little sister to be born. I remember the mix of excitement and nervousness in the air as they hurried to gather everything they needed. My mom was calm, but I could see the tension in my dad's face as he tried to keep everything under control. Before leaving, my dad crouched down to my height and placed his hands on my shoulders. "You're going to be fine, champ," he told me, his voice steady, though edged with urgency. "We'll be back as soon as we can. Just stay inside, lock the doors, and don't answer the phone unless it's us. You're in charge, understood?" I nodded, trying to imitate his calm. I was not scared. At least that was what I told myself. In reality, I was excited. It was the first time I was going to stay home alone at night, and I felt grown up, ready to prove that I could handle it. When they drove away, I stood by the window watching the taillights disappear into the darkness. The house felt different without them. Bigger, emptier. But I was not afraid. I had my favorite movie ready, a bag of chips and a can of soda. It was going to be a fun night. Or at least that was what I thought. It must have been around 1 o'clock in the morning when I started to feel uneasy. The movie had just ended, and the house was completely silent. I remember thinking how strange it was that a house could feel so empty, so still as if it were holding its breath. I got up to turn off the television, the remote feeling heavy in my hand as I crossed the living room. Then I saw something out of the corner of my eye. Movement. Right outside the front door. I froze. My heart seemed to lurch in my chest. I tried to convince myself it was probably nothing. Maybe a car passing by and its headlights casting shadows across the porch. But when I looked more closely, I realized the shadow was not coming from any car. It was a person. I could not make them out clearly, only the faint silhouette of a figure standing outside, barely visible through the frosted glass of the front door. They were tall. Their shoulders were hunched as if they were trying to stay out of sight. I stood there for what felt like forever, my mind racing. Who could it be? My parents were not supposed to be back yet, and they had the only other key. No one else knew I was home alone, at least no one who should have known. Then, very slowly, the doorknob began to turn. My breath caught in my throat as I watched the handle move back and forth, the soft rattle of metal against metal filling the silence of the house. Whoever it was, they were trying to get in. Panic surged through me and I ran toward the hallway. My bare feet slapped against the wooden floor as I tried desperately to think. I knew I had to hide, but where? My bedroom seemed too obvious, too easy to find. The closets were too small, too narrow. But there was one place I knew they would never think to check. The hallway closet. It was narrow, barely wide enough for coats and shoes, with a small shelf above for storage. I had hidden there before during games of hide and seek with my friends, and no one had ever found me. It was uncomfortable and smelled like old leather and mothballs, but it was my best option. I squeezed myself inside and closed the door as carefully as I could. My heart was pounding so hard in my chest that I was sure whoever was outside could hear it. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to make myself as small as possible. My eyes fixed on the thin line of light coming through the crack in the door. I waited. Every muscle in my body was tense, my ears strained to catch any sound. For a moment there was nothing, only silence. A thick, oppressive silence, as if the whole world had stopped moving. I started to think maybe the person had left, that they had given up and decided to go away. But then I heard the front door creak open. I bit my lip to stop myself from gasping. My whole body was shaking with fear. The intruder had entered the house. Then came the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, as if they were in no hurry at all. The footsteps echoed through the hallway and grew louder as they moved toward the living room. I heard the dull thud of something heavy being set on the floor, followed by the faint rustle of fabric. Whoever it was, they were not alone. I could hear low voices speaking in murmurs, though I could not make out what they were saying. My mind started imagining possibilities. Burglars, kidnappers, something worse. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the terror threatening to overwhelm me. I did not dare move. I did not even dare breathe too loudly, afraid that the slightest sound would give me away. And then the voices stopped. I opened my eyes, my breathing ragged, and listened closely. The footsteps had started moving again. This time they were coming down the hallway, toward me. The sound of the footsteps grew closer and closer, and each step sent a fresh jolt of fear through my body. I could see someone's shadow moving just on the other side of the closet door, barely visible through the crack. I held my breath, praying they would not find me. But then the closet door began to open. I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood. My heart hammered in my chest as the door slowly swung open, inch by inch. I tried to shrink into myself as much as possible, flattening myself against the back wall and hoping the darkness would hide me. The door stopped halfway open, and for a moment nothing happened. I could hear the intruder breathing slow and steady, only inches away from me. My mind would not stop spinning. What would they do if they found me? Would they hurt me? Something worse. But then suddenly the door slammed shut. I nearly jumped out of my skin. My heart was beating so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I heard the intruder walk away, their footsteps retreating down the hallway. I stayed hidden, too scared to move, listening as the footsteps grew fainter and fainter until I could no longer hear them at all. But I knew I could not come out. The intruders were still inside the house, and I could not risk them seeing me. I could hear them moving through the house, opening drawers, rummaging through closets, searching cabinets. Their voices stayed low and tense. They were looking for something: money, valuables, anything they could carry away. I heard one of them mutter a curse under their breath, frustrated at not finding what they were looking for. The minutes stretched on forever. Each one seemed to last for hours. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. But I knew I had to stay quiet. I was alone, and no one was coming to help me. Finally, after what felt like forever, I heard the front door creak open again. The intruders were leaving. I stayed inside the closet, shaking, waiting until I was completely sure they were gone. I did not dare move until I heard the sound of an engine starting outside, followed by the squeal of tires on the pavement, and then silence. I did not come out of the closet right away. I was too scared, too shaken by what had just happened. I kept thinking the intruders might come back, realize they had forgotten something, and return to finish what they had started. But they did not come back. When I finally gathered enough courage to step out of my hiding place, the house was eerily quiet. The living room was a mess. The couch cushions had been thrown to the floor. The drawers were open and emptied out across the room. Papers were scattered everywhere. They had taken everything valuable they could find. Jewelry, electronics, even the cash my parents kept in the kitchen drawer. I walked through the house in a daze, still caught in the grip of fear, but feeling another emotion beginning to break through. Anger. They had invaded my home, my safe place, and I had not been able to do anything about it. I found the phone lying on the floor where they had left it after cutting the line. My hands were shaking as I dialed 911. My voice was barely steady as I explained to the operator what had happened. The police arrived quickly. The flashing lights of the patrol cars cast an eerie glow across the walls as they searched the house and took my statement. I told them everything I could remember. The shadows, the voices, the way they had searched the house as if they knew exactly what they were looking for. But when it was all over and the police left, I was alone again. The house did not feel the same anymore. It was no longer a safe place. Now it was a place where bad things could happen. A place where strangers could simply walk in and take whatever they wanted. My parents came back the next morning, exhausted but filled with happiness over the birth of my sister. But their joy turned to horror the moment they saw the state of the house and learned what had happened. My dad held me tightly. His hands were shaking as he apologized again and again for leaving me alone. My mom cried. Her tears fell onto my hair as she held me in her arms. But the damage was already done. The intruders were gone, and they had taken more than our valuables. They had taken my sense of safety. My belief that my home was a place where nothing bad could happen. For weeks after that, I could not sleep. Every noise made me jump. Every shadow sent a chill of fear through me. I kept expecting the intruders to come back and finish what they had started, but they never returned. And it remained as a reminder that no place is ever truly safe. Story 4. It was supposed to be a quiet night. My parents had gone out to dinner, leaving me home alone for the first time in what felt like forever. I was already a teenager, and at last they trusted me enough to leave me in charge of the house. Honestly, I had been looking forward to it. No siblings bothering me, no parents telling me to turn off the TV or do my homework. Just me, a bowl of popcorn, and hours of uninterrupted video games. The house was silent, the kind of silence that only exists when everyone else is gone. At first it felt nice, a sort of comforting calm that made the whole place feel truly mine. I settled into my favorite corner of the couch, controller in hand, and lost myself in the pixelated world on the screen. But as the hours passed, that silence started to feel different. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen became much more noticeable, and every little sound in the house made me pause, my heart giving a jump. I told myself it was nothing. Old houses make noise, and I was just being paranoid. Besides, I was having a good time, and I was not about to let a few creaks in the floor ruin my night. But just as I was about to finish a particularly difficult level, something caught my attention. Movement outside the window. At first, I thought it was just the reflection of the video game on the glass, a trick of the light making it seem as though something was moving outside. But when I looked again, I saw it clearly. There was a figure sitting on the patio. My heart lurched and a cold sweat ran down the back of my neck. The patio was just on the other side of the living room window, perfectly visible from where I was sitting. But the figure was positioned in such a way that I could not see its face. I could only make out the outline of a body leaning forward, as if it were waiting for something. I paused the game. Suddenly, my hands were damp on the controller. I narrowed my eyes, trying to make out who it was. Maybe one of my friends playing a prank on me, or some neighbor who had wandered over there. But as I watched, the figure turned slightly, and I caught a glimpse of its face. It was not anyone I knew. I sat frozen, my mind racing as I tried to understand what I was seeing. It was a man older than me, probably in his late 30s or early 40s. He had short, dark hair and was wearing a plain hooded sweatshirt. The hood covered much of his face, but what I could see was enough to freeze my blood. He was smiling. It was not a friendly smile. It was a wide, unsettling grin stretched across his face, as if something was incredibly funny to him. His gaze was fixed on the house, but his eyes did not seem focused on anything in particular. They just stared, unblinking. I swallowed hard as I felt my pulse quicken. This was not normal. Whoever this man was, he had no reason to be there. I thought about going outside and confronting him, but something stopped me. There was something about the way he sat there, so still, so silent, that made me feel like I should not go near him. Instead, I stood up slowly, trying not to make any noise, and moved closer to the window to get a better look. The man did not react. He did not even seem to notice my presence. He kept staring ahead, that creepy smile fixed on his face, and then he started laughing. It was a strange laugh, almost impossible to hear through the glass, but I could see his shoulders shaking and his chest rising and falling with silent laughter. There was no sound, only the movement, as if he were laughing at a joke only he could hear. A wave of nausea rose through me. This was not just some random stranger. This was someone who was clearly not right in the head, and he was sitting on my patio laughing to himself. I took a step back, my mind racing as I tried to figure out what to do. My parents would not be back for several hours, and I did not want to call them and scare them unless it was absolutely necessary. But I also could not pretend this was not happening. I decided to lock all the doors. At least that way, if he tried to get in, he would not be able to. I moved quickly, trying not to make any noise. I locked the front door, then the back door. I made sure all the windows were firmly shut. The entire time, I could feel the man's presence on the patio, that silent laughter repeating in my head. But when I returned to the living room to check the sliding glass door that led to the patio, I felt my heart nearly stop. The man was standing pressed against the glass. His face was only inches from the door. I stumbled backward, nearly falling over the coffee table as I scrambled away in panic. The man was still smiling, his hands pressed against the glass and his breath fogging the surface. Now I could see him more clearly. The pale, sickly tone of his skin, the dark circles under his eyes, and that smile. It was as if he was enjoying all of this, as if he knew exactly how terrified I was and was savoring every second of it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call for help, but my voice caught in my throat. Instead, I kept backing away, my heart pounding, trying to put as much distance between him and me as possible. The man did not move. He just stayed there watching me. His eyes followed every one of my movements. And then, without warning, he reached for the door handle. My breath caught when I realized what he was trying to do. He was going to come inside. I ran for the door and got there just as the handle started to move. I grabbed it and locked it with trembling hands at the exact moment the man pulled on it from the other side. For a moment, we stood face to face, separated by nothing but a thin panel of glass. I could see the amusement in his eyes, the twisted pleasure he was getting from the situation. He pulled on the door again, this time harder, but it held. I stepped back, my thoughts spinning. What was he going to do now? Would he try to break the glass? Did he have a weapon? I did not know. And that uncertainty was almost worse than anything else. But then, to my surprise, he let go of the handle. He took a step back. His smile widened even more as he tapped his finger lightly against the glass, as if the whole thing were a game. Then he laughed again, a silent, disturbing laugh that made my skin crawl. I could not take it anymore. I ran to my bedroom, slammed the door shut, and locked it. My heart hammered in my chest. I grabbed the phone, my hand shaking, and dialed 911. The operator's calm voice clashed violently with the panic I was feeling. I tried to explain what was happening, but the words came out rushed, nearly incoherent. There's a man on my patio trying to get in. He's just standing there, laughing. The operator assured me that the police were already on the way, but the wait felt endless. I stayed on the phone, my eyes fixed on the crack beneath the door, half expecting to see shadows moving outside. My head filled with the worst possible scenarios. What if the man got in before the police arrived? What if he was not alone? But just when I was about to lose hope, I heard heavy footsteps outside, followed by loud pounding on the front door. "Police, open up!" I nearly cried with relief. I opened my bedroom door and ran toward the entrance. I yanked it open. There were 2 officers there, their faces serious, but the sight of them made me feel as though I could finally breathe again. "Are you okay?" one of them asked, his voice calm but urgent. I nodded, still shaking. He was on the patio, trying to get in. The officers exchanged a look, and one of them told me to stay inside while they checked the perimeter. I watched from the doorway as they circled the house, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. But when they came back, their expressions were grim. "We didn't find anyone," one of them said. "Are you sure he was there?" I nodded, feeling another wave of fear go through me. He was right there at the door. The officer sighed and looked at his partner. "We'll file a report and have someone keep an eye on the area tonight. But if you see anything else, anything at all, call us right away." I nodded without saying anything, still stunned. The reality of what had happened was finally starting to sink in. The man was gone, but the fear was not. It was still there, gnawing at the edges of my mind. The police stayed a little longer, making sure the house was secured and taking my statement. They tried to reassure me. They said it was probably just a drifter or someone playing a cruel prank. But I could see the concern in their eyes. When they finally left, I was alone again. The silence of the house was no longer comforting. Now it was oppressive. I could not force myself to go back into the living room, to face the sliding glass door where the man had been standing. Instead, I stayed locked in my bedroom, jumping at every little noise. I did not sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile, those dark, empty eyes staring back at me. I kept imagining that he would come back, that he would find a way inside, and what would happen if he did. When my parents returned late that night, I practically ran to them and blurted out everything that had happened all at once. Of course, they were horrified, but by then it was already too late. The man had disappeared and there was nothing they could do. We called the police again, but they found no trace of him. No footprints, no marks, not a single piece of evidence. It was as if he had never been there at all. For weeks after that night, I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I walked past the living room, I felt the need to look toward the patio to make sure it was empty. I checked the locks on every door and window twice, leaving nothing to chance. But no matter what I did, I could not get that man's face out of my head. That twisted smile, that silent laughter. It was as if it had been burned into my memory. A reminder that no matter how safe you think you are, there is always something out there waiting to find a way in. Even now, years later, I still get chills when I think about that night. I have gone on with my life. I have tried to forget it. But the fear remains. It is a dark shadow that follows me wherever I go. I have already moved out of my parents' house, but sometimes late at night, when I am alone and the house is silent, I can still feel him there, standing on the other side of the window, watching, waiting, laughing. If these stories made your heart race, do not forget to leave a like and share these chills with your friends. Subscribe for more spine-tingling tales and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss any updates. If you also lived through a terrifying experience while home alone, leave it in the comments. I am dying to read it. Remember, safety is never guaranteed, especially when you are alone. Stay alert. See you in the next nightmare.